Trotskyist political organization at the time would refer to Trotskyism as the Jewish disease. No offense. So Jean-Pierre Bouvet, who passed away last year, unfortunately, as an entire generation is now being eclipsed by the Grim Reaper, was another one of the leaders. Another one was Michael Lowy, who you might know, who was also a very well-known academic and philosopher and writer. And then there was another person with one name. His name was Bergeat. He had a name just like Javard, Bergeat. And he was slightly older than most of these youth who were in their early 20s then, in their early to mid-20s. And he had been a member of the very small French section of the Fourth International, which had existed. It only had 50 members, prior to the explosion of May-June. And there were several others. Charles Michelou, who was a medical doctor. And there were only two women. It was a very much of a, as the entire left was at that time, it was very much of a male-dominated political organization. The two women were Jeannette Laval and Catherine Savary during that time. All the rest were males during that period. And so as I watched these people, I watched them work in the headquarters. I watched them when they went to lunch. I went with them to lunch. They would always go to a nearby Vietnamese restaurant. Vietnamese cuisine was in those days. There were a lot of Vietnamese who had fled into China and moved to Paris. And they would go have Vietnamese food. And each of them would have, I would say on average, maybe 3 bottles of wine for lunch. I didn't like wine. I was a beer man. I was always looking for Alsatian beer. But I noticed with some alarm that they had these leaders of a major revolutionary organization had with their lunch. They had, including Bensaid, they had 3 bottles of wine with the Vietnamese food. But lunch was a very, very animated time. It was energized. It was full of political argumentation about all of the major political issues of the day, and sharp disputes and what have you. But it was absolutely fascinating. My French was anemic, to say the least, but I didn't have enough of it to sort of get the drift of what the discussions were engaging. And it was just of these 12 that I mentioned, and there were others as well. Daniel Bensaid, stood out as one of the most animated, one of the most enthusiastic, one of the most energetic of the bunch. That he was engaged in these kinds of passionate discussions with other people, and you could see that he was really quite somewhat special, and you could see that why he had been, the co-leader of the great student revolt of May and June 1968 in Paris. So for a month, I was able to meet with him, see him and work, talk to him, and understand that I was dealing with a very special person, somebody who was really quite extraordinary in this instance. Although I did see him from time to time in the 1980s and 1990s when I was in Paris, it was usually at demonstrations, and he was across a crowded room, so to speak, or a crowded plaza. And we did not have much of a chance for discussions during those years, those 2 decades. But my next encounter with him, sustained encounter with Daniel, was in 1997. And there I spent a month in Amsterdam in November and December of 1997 at the cadre school of the Fourth International, the Revolutionary Socialist organization of which Daniel Bensaid was the leader. That was held in Amsterdam. And he was one of the presenters at that summer school, and his presentations, of course, were first rate, although he had already become ill with age by that time, and it was starting to take its toll on his body. That when I met him, I did not recognize him at the time. But we did get a chance to reacquaint ourselves, and I saw that he, even though his body was becoming more frail, he still had that kind of verve, that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of energy that he had witnessed, that he had exhibited, you know, some 22 years previously. And then the last time that I saw Daniel was right here in Chicago. Through Eric's good efforts, we brought him here to speak in Chicago under the auspices of the late lamented New World Resource Center, which the Open University of the Left has replaced. It's probably about the only venue for the independent left discussions and forums in Chicago. And we brought him here, and he gave an excellent presentation, and we were able to
When?
our wings.
When?
When was it, Eric? What year? Was it 2000? 2000? It was earlier than earlier in the last decade. Maybe it was a little later than 2000. You know, sometime like that. That was the last time he was in the United States. So that was basically, those are my relations with him. Keith worked with him much more closely. Keith was a member of the OCR, the same organization of which Daniel was a leader, and he worked with him on the Revolutionary Socialist magazine, International Viewpoint, which Keith and Daniel both wrote for. And he's going to talk more about Daniel's later years. I just want to give you a brief summary of his biography, because it's really quite fascinating and what led him to become a leader of the great student revolt. And I should say, really, in truth, the student worker revolt of May-June 1968. That Daniel had been born in 1946 in Toulouse, a large city in the southwest of France. He came from a Sephardic Jewish background. His father was a Sephardic Jew from Algeria, from Oran in Algeria. And his father had managed to escape Algeria one jump ahead of the pro-Nazi Vichy French, and two of Bensaid's uncles, his father's brothers, were killed by the Nazis because obviously they were Jewish. So his father managed to escape to France. His father had married a non-Jew, a woman who was a French colonial settler in Algeria. So he was only half Jewish in that sense. But his father opened a bistro in Toulouse, and that's where Daniel was born. Unfortunately, his father died when Daniel was quite young. Both of his parents, both of Daniel's parents, were strong sympathizers of the French Communist Party, and his mother was particularly imbued with the Jacobinism. She was imbued with the whole radical tradition of the left in France. So Daniel grew up in that kind of milieu, that kind of an atmosphere in the city of Toulouse. And when he was 15 years old, he in 1962 he joined the Union of Communist Students, which was something that a young person with a Communist Party background would do, and very rapidly became a leader of the Union of Communist Students. But under the influence of several influences, the influence of course, the famed Marxist economist and revolutionary socialist Ernest Mandel, under the influence of Che Guevara, and certainly under the influence of Leon Trotsky, that Daniel Bensaid and several other young leaders of the Union of Communist Students decided that the Communist Party was not the way to go. They developed a critique of Stalinism, and they broke, we're speaking here primarily now of Alain Perrin, Daniel Bensaid, and